Hello, we are Team 7, and today we'll be presenting our Lean Six Sigma project aimed at streamlining the proposal creation process at XYZTech. My name is Link. I'll be providing an overview of the project, followed by a detailed discussion of the define phase of our Lean Six Sigma initiative. We'll begin with our mission statement, then analyze the case data using the Lean Six Sigma DMAIC approach. And then we'll identify our resources and possible project execution constraints. Now, here is our mission statement. Recognizing a decline in both market share and revenue over the past 2 years, our goal is to improve the efficiency of the proposal creation process, reducing cycle time by 15%, and regaining the company's market leader position. Here is an overview of the define phase. We began by developing a project charter to state our mission, define the project and its objectives, and identify stakeholders, tools and steps, resources, and constraints. For the project to be successful, support and cooperation from all stakeholders are essential. These stakeholders include the company CEO, the VP of Supply Chain Operations, the project team, which includes a black belt, bid support staffs, the design and pricing teams, brand managers, and last but not least, the sellers and customers. To effectively achieve our goal of reducing cycle time in the proposal creation process, we need to understand our process customers' needs, specifically the sellers and the bid support staffs. We analyzed the feedback data retrieved from the ERP system and created Pareto charts for both sellers and bid support staff's feedback. Based on the information in the charts and the 80-20 rule, we found that most of the problems slowing down the process could be resolved by addressing a few critical issues identified by these process customers. These critical issues include difficulty in identifying bid support staffs, missing configuration details, incomplete information, documentation provided late, and errors in addresses provided. After identifying the customer's pain points, let's examine the current process to spot areas of inefficiency. At the first look, we notice 5 stages between the seller submitting a request and the design team receiving it for configuration. Continuing through the process, there are 2 sub-processes for which we don't have any process information. Even without delving into the cycle time data, we can already identify potential inefficiencies in the current process. We'll gain a clearer understanding of these issues during the measure and analyze phases. During our define phase, we developed a detailed project plan and officially kicked off the project on July 1st of this year. Since this is a school project, we completed the define, measure, and analyze phases within a month. In a real business setting, the timeline would be as shown on this slide. For the improve and control phases, we'll provide some possible improvement solutions and control methods. As I said earlier, since this is a school project, we won't be able to test out our improvement and control plans. Next, my teammate Sebastian will be presenting the measure phase.
All right, I'm Sebastian, and I will be covering the measure phase. So as an overview, the objectives of this phase will be to measure the cycle time and identify bottlenecks and delays in the process, and establish a baseline for our current performance metrics. So tools and steps. First will be data collection, defining our methods of collecting data on the existing process. Baseline metrics, establish our current performance metrics for cycle time, and loop it back to the process mapping by overlaying those cycle times on the detailed process map to visualize the current process timing. So first is data collection. So what data do we have? Well, we have existing data already on the current process. This data is not only samples, but the complete data set of every transaction completed over the last few years. This data is not manual, but is in process, which means that the collection of data is integrated into the process and therefore recorded automatically. This is very helpful for us to be able to analyze the past data, as well as know that we have a good data tracking system going forwards. So first, some baseline metrics. So what we have here are some key summary statistics on each of the 9 steps of the process and the total cycle time as well. So a couple things that jump out immediately. The minimum cycle time for each timestamp is 1.0 days. So what that means is even if we can get it done in less than a day, we cannot show any less than a 1-day cycle time between process steps. Our minimum is 1.0. So that's something to note as far as our quicker process steps that may be able to be handled within a single day. Next, I noticed that the largest variation exists in ZQT4, despite being the 3rd longest process step. We see that steps 6 and 8 have a longer average cycle time, yet have less variation, a smaller standard deviation and sample variance, than our 4th process step does. So what might cause this? Well, as we learned in the process map with Ling, this step is to ensure that the seller provided all information. And we're seeing big variation, meaning they may have to be going back to the seller multiple times to get that information. So we could likely remove this process step simply by requiring all fields in that initial request from the seller. We can note that later in our improve phase. So the ultimate findings here are going to be the average cycle times for each process step, as well as the average total cycle times. So let's overlay these average cycle times on our process map to visualize them. So here is that initial process map, except now overlaid with our cycle time timestamps up at the top, as well as our total cycle time. So how do we visualize each of these steps and the times that they're taking? Well, we can first see that from identifying the opportunity to the seller actually submitting the request in the ERP system takes about 1.9 days. From then, it takes about 2 days for the bid support specialist to go open that request. Once opened, we got to determine if it's the correct bid support specialist, which takes about 3.1 days. Once we've got the right agent, we need them to review with their manager, which happens about 3.6 days later. Once they're reviewing this with their manager, how long until they can submit the proposal to the product design team? That's going to be about 2 days. So here, now how long is it going to take once they submit this proposal until that configuration is complete? About 7.4 days, our longest cycle time. Does this really make sense? Well, in that phase, we've got a sub-process where the product design team needs to generate a configuration with technical specifications. So yes, it does make sense with a sub-process that the cycle time is about 7.4 days. And if we were to aim to reduce this cycle time, we may need to do an analysis specifically on that configuration generation process. So that one does make sense. Moving along, how long does it take to get that configuration approved? About 3.1 days. And from there, how long until that approved configuration is priced? 6.5 days, our second longest cycle time. Again, does this make sense? Yes, it does. Because again, we have a sub-process where the pricing team must review the configuration and generate a price considering many different inputs. Again, this makes sense that it's the second longest cycle time. So once we have the priced configuration sent back to the BSS, how long to go through final approvals and take the proposal back to the client? About 2.0 days. And so now we can visualize these average cycle times for each process step on our process map. So we now have a standard process map with average cycle times as a company. But can we apply these averages to every region and brand? Well, let's break it down. So here we have the average total cycle time by geography. And very quickly we see that Japan's is significantly lower than the other regions, and North America's is significantly higher. Why might that be? Well, if we look at the count of bids, Japan has the fastest average cycle time because they process about half the proposals of any other geographic region. So it makes sense that they're a little bit quicker on average. Now, why would North America take so long when EMEA processes just as many bids? Well, if we bring in the value, we see that North America likely takes the longest because they deal with the greatest monetary value. So now let's do the same thing by brand, right? Looking at the average total cycle time by brand, we see that the cycle times are very balanced. Now, if we're going to follow the same logic as with geography, this makes perfect sense. The count of bids are very balanced across all 5 brands, and the total value is very balanced. So it makes sense that they all have a similar average total cycle time. So what can we do with that as a quick side note, right? Maybe jumping ahead a bit to improve, but based on those quick measurements, we already have a quick and easy process improvement. The brands are evenly balanced and likely don't need to be addressed. However, geography is very unbalanced, as we just saw. So, who do we have managing these workloads? Well, as explained in the case, we have 20 bid support specialists at each of the 5 geographic locations, 4 specialists for each brand at each of the 5 locations. Well, if Japan is flying through their bids and North America is taking quite a while, What if we take 5 bid support specialists, one for each brand, and move them over from Japan to North America? This would be a quick and easy fix. We'd now have 15 specialists in Japan and 25 in North America, and hopefully this would drive us to a more balanced average cycle time across all 5 regions. So, the baseline. After completing the measure phase, we now have a baseline established on the existing process. We've got a distribution of the total cycle time with all of our key metrics there at the right. And our total cycle time is distributed nearly normally with a slight right skew. Now, with this skew, our mean cycle time does not fall in the center of our distribution. It falls a little bit to the right. So, from this baseline, the goal with the following steps, analyze, improve, and control, will be to move this mean value back to center, and then take our distribution and move the entire distribution back left to a tighter, more controlled distribution centered around the mean with a lower mean total cycle time. So, with the baseline established, I will now pass this back to Philip to talk about analyze. Thanks.
Thanks, Sebastian. I'm Phil, and I'll be going over the analyze phase for the XYZ case. The primary goals of the analyze phase are to do some benchmarking of the current processes and identify the root causes of the inefficiencies and delays, and see if we can identify any variability among the business groups to pinpoint whether the issues are in a concentrated area of the business or if they're global. We'll also be attempting to identify the steps in the process that need to be addressed immediately to see significant improvement, and we'll be using several visualizations to help the primary stakeholders understand what's going on and where they can focus their attention at improvements first. As Sebastian has previously mentioned, our analysis indicates that the cycle times are mostly consistent across all 5 brands. This suggests that the underlying issues affecting proposal creation delays are systemic and not isolated to specific product lines. Therefore, suggested improvements targeting process inefficiencies, training, and communication will have a broad positive impact across the entire organization. Sebastian has also previously discussed the Japan team. This visualization highlights the number of proposals processed and the average total cycle time across different geographies. The main takeaways here are that regions like North America and Europe, Middle East, Asia process a high number of proposals, but experience longer cycle times, potentially indicating that resource capacity has been reached and additional resources are needed. Japan does stand out with a significantly lower cycle time, which may suggest highly efficient processes. However, this is coupled with a lower volume of proposals, which might contribute to their efficiency. XYZ should look to prioritize process improvements and resource allocation in high-volume regions such as North America and Europe, Middle East, Asia to reduce cycle times and balance the workload, while also investigating and adopting the best practices from Japan's efficient proposal processing to improve the longer cycle times in other regions. XYZ should also try to implement standardized processes and training across all geographies to ensure consistent performance and improved cycle times globally. We've also run a regression analysis against the dependent variable total cycle time, and this yields an R-squared of 0.84, suggesting a good fit. This regression model is statistically significant. The coefficients and t-values for bid size and defects show a significant positive relationship with cycle time, indicating that larger bid sizes and the presence of defects is associated with longer cycle times. In fact, The presence of defects increases the cycle time by almost 12 days. Conversely, these same values for seller and BSS feedback are not significant, and we have confirmed with a separate correlation matrix that no specific feedback has any meaningful impact on total cycle time. So we'll have to utilize seller and BSS feedback in another way. This slide details the fishbone diagram we've created using seller and BSS feedback provided in the data. By identifying the root causes of delays in the proposal creation process and implementing targeted improvements, XYZTech can significantly reduce cycle time and improve the efficiency of the proposal creation process. Regular monitoring and feedback will ensure that these improvements are sustained over time. For example, automating and standardizing approval workflows would reduce delays. XYZ should focus on brand and pricing approvals initially. Additionally, XYZ should provide targeted training for BSS agents and ensure that IT staff can handle complex configurations while minimizing downtime. Finally, checklists should be implemented to improve communication and ensure completeness and accuracy of the information through all stages. Finally, this Pareto chart highlights the contributions of each stage in the proposal creation process to the total cycle time. Key takeaways from this chart note that stages 6 and 8 are the most significant contributors to the total cycle time, accounting for the largest portions of the delay. The cumulative percentage line illustrates that these stages alone contribute to a substantial portion of the total cycle time, crossing the 80% mark, which aligns with the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. Focusing improvement efforts on stages 6 and 8 can yield the most significant reductions in overall cycle time. By targeting these key stages for process optimization and resource allocation, we can effectively streamline the proposal creation process and achieve substantial time savings.
Hello, my name is Jisung and I will go over the improve phase. So far, we defined the objectives, measured the cycle times, and analyzed the data to identify the root causes of inefficiencies and delays. Now that we have gathered and analyzed the data, our objective to improve our process is to develop actionable recommendations to eliminate efficiencies and reduce cycle time. Then, we will implement process change and track its improvements, and share best practices and benchmark internally to ensure consistency across geographies. We will accomplish these objectives by using tools and steps following: brainstorming sessions, generate ideas for process improvement with project team, processing redesign, develop a new, streamlined process map incorporating improvements, pilot testing, implement changes on a small scale to test their effectiveness, and implementation plan. Roll out a successful improvement across all geographies. As stated previously in the measure phase, ZQT4 stage has the largest variation despite being the third longest process step. To enhance the process, we will eliminate ZQT4 stage. During the STS1 stage, when sellers submit their request, we will require all information on the initial request form to be completed. This change will eliminate the need for verification that all information is filled in. As a result, removing ZQT4 stage will reduce the cycle time to 0. As stated previously in the measure phase, although the cycle time of the brand are evenly balanced, geography is very unbalanced due to Japan having the fastest cycle and the NA having the longest average cycle time. When we can balance out the geographic cycle by moving 5 bid support specialists from Japan to North America, which will result in cycle time for Japan to increase, an average cycle time, and the average cycle time for North America to decrease. As we move 4 bid support specialists to 3 or 4 or 5 bid support specialists, we will need to create a conversion rate to calculate the news cycle. For Japan, the process starts with an initial configuration of 4 BSS, the bit support specialist. The total cycle time of phase, represented as x, is divided by 4 to get the initial cycle time, x divided by 4. When the number of BSS is reduced to 3, the new cycle time for Japan is calculated by dividing the total cycle time by 3, x divided by 3. To find the new total cycle time, x is adjusted to reflect this change. X equals 4 times cycle time of phase, all divided by 3. This means the new cycle time for the phase will be 4 over 3 times the original cycle time, indicating an increase in cycle time due to the reduction in BSS. Similarly, for North America, its BSS increased from 4 to 5. Using the same logic we used in Japan, the new total cycle time will be x equals to 4 times the cycle time of phase, all divided by 5. To note, the ratio 4 over 3 and 4 over 5 are used because each brand initially had 4 BSS. In Japan, the count was reduced to 3 BSS per brand, changing the total count from 20 to 15. This corresponds to the cycle time adjustment ratio of 4 over 3. For North America again, the same logic applies, increasing the total count from 20 to 25 BSS, resulting in a cycle time adjustment ratio of 4 over 5. The conversion rate logic in the previous slides are applied exclusively to specific stages where the bid support specialists are involved. The relevant stages are ZQT2, ZQT3, ZQT5, ZQT6, ZQT7, and STSX. These are the only stages where the bid support specialists are involved. Looking at the table in the bottom, we have applied the conversion rate adjustment only to North America and Japan, as these regions require improvements. Additionally, these conversion rates are specifically applied to the stages mentioned in the previous slides: ZQT2, ZQT3, ZQT5, ZQT6, ZQT7, and STSX. Now, one thing to note, you can see that STSX stage includes a times 1/2 formula in its equation. This will be discussed in the next slide. We will improve our process additionally by removing unnecessary step in STSX stage. Because there is no option for the proposal support manager to reflect the final documentations anyway, we can remove this unnecessary step, allowing the cycle time to cut in half. And that is where we got the times half formula in the equation. With the changes discussed previously, we can now see the effects of improvements. We can see that the mean has decreased from 31.63 to 26.51, decreasing 5 days. The standard deviation and sample variance had bigger numbers before, but now it has significantly decreased, as well as the maximum and range, which both decreased by around 8 to 10 days. And this is the process map before the improvement. Now, we're going to improve our process by eliminating the ZQT4 process's approval process, which also eliminates going back to seller for more info. Then we will eliminate sending the final documents to support manager to save more time. With these changes, here are our improved process. Few things to note. We completely eliminated ZQT4. ZQT3 dropped down to 2.9 days. ZQT6 is down to 7.3 days. ZQT7 is down to 3 days. And finally, STSX is down to 1 day. And as a total, the total cycle time went down to 26.5 days. We've seen this before. Here's the key cycle time metrics by geographic before improvement, where you can see Japan has 27.25 average of total cycle time and North America having 35.97 average of total cycle time. With the improvement, we can see that although Japan's average of total cycle time has gone up 2.53 days, now having the longest cycle time, North America's average total cycle time has gone down to 25.45 average of total cycle time, now having the fastest cycle time. As we had aimed this mission, the geographic regions are now more balanced. And with this improvement along with the others, the average cycle time for the company is down 5.12 days. Now, re-looking at this histogram and key metrics before the improvement introduced in the measure phase, we had this mean off-centered 31.63 days, being skewed distribution. And if you recall, our goal was to take this distribution and clean it back to this direction, which is exactly what we found in our new distribution, riding at a mean of just 26.51 days with the ultimate delta of 16% reduction in total cycle time. Now I will pass it back to Rebecca to talk about control phase.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca and I will be going over the control phase for re-engineering the proposal creation process. Here our main focus is to ensure that the improvements we made are sustained over time. So first we're going to start by discussing our key objectives and the tools that we'll use to achieve them. So first, for our objectives, we established a control plan. This will help us monitor the new process and just make sure that the improvements we've implemented are maintained. Second, we will develop key performance indicators, and these KPIs will give us measurable data to assess how well our process is performing. And then we want to implement regular reviews and updates, and this will help us maintain the efficiency of our process over time. Next, we have our tools and steps. So first, we have a control plan. So this document just outlines the procedures that we use for monitoring our process and maintaining those process improvements. Next, we have our statistical process control. So this involves using our control charts, and these charts will help us visualize any variations in the process and if our process is not in control, how to address that. And then we have our continuous improvement. So we want to establish a feedback loop so we make sure that we can look for ways to improve and optimize our process. And then lastly, we have our training and communication. So we think that it's important that all stakeholders are informed and trained on any new processes. Moving into the control phase of this process, we first get into our control chart. And this chart is essential in ensuring that each step of our process is just consistently meeting our standards. And just a quick overview of what this control chart consists of. We have our process name and our process steps. So this is just a breakdown of the series of actions involved in the process. Then we have our evaluation. So this involves measuring aspects such as the time taken for submission, time taken for review, approval, and so on. Then we have our sampling requirements. So for each step, for instance, we might select 25 requests each week to measure the submission times, checking times, and so on. Then we have our control method. So this is how we will compare our collected data against any predefined standards. This just helps us determine if our process is performing up to standards. And then we have our reaction plan. So this just outlines any actions we will take if we detect any issues. And if you take a closer look at this control chart, you can see in the first step, it is now the seller's responsibility to make sure that all customer information has been filled in. That way, later on in the process, that step has been eliminated. We are no longer checking to see if all information has been filled in. And then we have also eliminated the option for or the role of the proposal support manager in the final step of the process. So now we dive into the statistical process control aspect of our project. And this is a method we use to monitor and control our process through statistical analysis. By using this tool, we ensure that our process remains stable and in control. So looking at both charts, we have our X bar chart and our R chart. And these are both using the values from our improved data set. So our cycle times have been cut short here because we have removed the role of the proposal support manager at the end of the process. And now we have made it a requirement for the seller to have all customer information on the initial request form so as to not delay the process later on. And therefore, this cuts our total cycle time values short. And we take 25 random samples of those time cycle values and we plotted them here, and we can see that all points are within control, are in the control limits, and we can therefore say that our process is stable and in control. So next we take a look at the key performance indicators that we've established so we can measure the ongoing performance of our process. And these KPIs will help us ensure that the improvements we've made are sustained over time. So first we take a look at our total cycle time, and this is important just so that we can understand the efficiency of our entire process. We have our accuracy rate. Obviously, we want this rate to be high so that we know we are minimizing any errors. Then we have our error rate. This is a rate we want to keep low so that we know that our proposals are of good quality and that we are reducing any delays. We have our delivery rate. So this just helps us ensure that we're meeting all deadlines. And then we have our correction rate. So this helps us identify areas where we might need to improve. And then we have a compliance rate. So this KPI just makes sure that we're consistently following all of the best practices and just maintaining process integrity. And then we have our success rate. So this indicates just the overall effectiveness and efficiency of our proposal process and how it impacts our outcome. Next, we will discuss our feedback loop. So this is to ensure that our process continuously improves in the future and remains efficient. And I've outlined the key steps here on the slides. Our first one involves holding feedback seminars or sessions. So we're just looking for all team members and stakeholders to share their experiences. And then we can understand different perspectives and different insights about the process. And then we have suggestions and surveys. So we want to regularly collect feedback through these surveys, and it just allows us to obtain more input from a broader audience. And then we have root cause analysis. So this just allows us to detect any issues that might arise and understand why they happen, but also how to address them in the future. Then we have benchmarking. So this just allows us to identify areas where we can improve and just allows us to remain ahead of the game. Then we have making document changes. So we just want to make sure that our documentation is up to date and it reflects any updated processes, and that just allows everyone to be aware of the latest procedures and best practices. Then we want to review all KPIs. So that means by analyzing these KPIs, we can identify any trends, we can measure the success of our process, and using that data, we can use it to make decisions so we can improve. And lastly, we just want to encourage continuous learning and improvement. So just create a culture where people value process refinement, and we can ensure that we remain proactive in making any improvements or enhancements. Next, in our control phase, we go into our training plan. So we came up with a comprehensive training plan. This is just to make sure that all stakeholders are prepared to execute their roles efficiently and effectively. And first, we have our general training, and this is for all stakeholders. Everyone must attend. And this is just a training that covers the overview of the new process. So we're hoping that the outcome here is that stakeholders just leave with a clear understanding of the new process and how they will play into that process. Then we have a role-specific training. So the audience here is a little bit more specific. So each session is catered to the unique needs of each role. And we hope here that stakeholders attending would just gain a more direct and in-depth expertise and proficiency for their roles. So it just makes sure that they're more proficient in the tools and tasks that they're responsible for in this role. Then we move into our ongoing training sessions. So over time, we continue to provide training sessions, and these are just designed to address anything new in the future, any new challenges, any new updates, so that all our stakeholders just remain informed. And then we want to implement our training evaluation. So this is just our way of measuring the effectiveness of our training programs. So we will conduct evaluations for all stakeholders, and this helps us refine our training session approach and just ensures that whatever is being taught in these training sessions is relevant and effective. So as we reach the end of our presentation, it's important that we acknowledge the resources that we've used and that have been instrumental in the processes that we've talked about today. So first, we have our personnel. Our project involved effort from team members across numerous departments. That includes supply chain operations, bid support, product design, pricing, and brand management. And then for budget, we had funds that were specifically allocated for process improvement activities, comprehensive training sessions, and technology enhancements. And lastly, our tools. So key tools that include our ERP system, data analysis software, process mapping tools, and platforms such as Tableau and Power BI. Lastly, it's important to outline our assumptions and constraints that come with this project. So first, we have our assumptions regarding data accessibility and accuracy. We assume that all relevant data from the ERP system will be accessible and accurate. We also assume that stakeholders will be cooperative and supportive of the process changes. And then moving into our constraints, this project must be completed within the allocated budget and time frame. So this means having efficient resource management and just adhering to the schedule. And then last, all changes must align with the overall company strategy and must not disrupt ongoing operations so we do not compromise other areas of our business.
Thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation and will consider our suggested improvements for XYZTech. Thanks.